GM. We're back here on Monday, August 29th. We have what could be a pretty busy week in NFTs ahead of us. CloneX just came out with some information on forging. We have the y00ts later this week. We have DigiDaigaku is kind of going wild. Moonbirds with the Future Proof conference coming up this week as well. So we'll be talking about all of that today. So, Tyler, a lot going on. We were talking a little earlier today that some of the stuff it's now just like adding on. You had mentioned you thought what happened if Yuga Bored Ape came out with anything this week, any sort of announcements, and then just a little while ago here, we had CloneX come out with a pretty big announcement. So there's a lot going on this week. I think the big main story from the weekend into today has been this DigiDaigaku run that they've been on. And then, of course, y00ts and DGods have been going wild as well. So how have you been over this weekend with some of this crazy stuff going on?
Man, they tried to take it away from us and with this crypto crash that started Friday. So last week we were building up so much momentum. Thursday on the show, we were feeling good and good spirits. People were grail shopping. The markets were in the green. PFP's up 10 to 20%. Then ETH essentially spent the entire weekend in the dumper. Well, guess what? It's creeping back up. And we knew that this was likely going to be a big week, and it is already off to a blazing fast start. My energy levels are a 10 out of 10. I'm ready to go. This is going to be the biggest week for the NFTs since the other side launched, and we're already seeing it.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting because like DGods have now been compared to they're like the Bored Apes of the Solana chain. And it's hard to argue against that. Like the way they've been running up ahead of this big event was similar to how Bored Apes ran up before their mutants. And it's been kind of wild with the coin going off as well. I think it was in the low twos when we were together on Thursday, and now it's almost $3.50. So it's been pretty hectic what's been going on over there, and everything you see on Twitter right now is like DGods and Frank, and they have a ton of the attention right now. So it'll be interesting to see what happens later in this week with that mint, because I think some people have pretty high hopes for it. So we'll see how that ends up playing out. But let's look at some of the project rankings page here and everything else that's been pumping or just having volume in general over the past week. Everything Yuga per usual, but then this DigiDaigaku. That's how I'm saying it. I'm not sure if that's how you correctly say it, but talk to us a little about this. And it's got over 2,500 ETH of volume in the past week.
So I thought for sure that y00ts was going to be the story of the week, the headliner, all the attention. I don't know anymore. Gabriel Layden, Limit Break, and let's just call them Digis, and the Digis team is stealing some of that spotlight. And we knew there was going to be an announcement today. And let's see, this is not it. Well, he announced essentially a massive fundraise from his Twitter. He's been tweeting all over the map, and we can get to that maybe in a little bit. But essentially $200 million raise for his company Limit Break to build new blockchain game. With a $200 million raise, and you have speculation on the total valuation, $2 billion. Definitely up there and likely with a B. And, last week we were talking about Gabriel's background in gaming. So his prior company, Machine Zone, sold off for $600 million just a few years ago. The games they had there, it's in the article somewhere. I'm totally blanking on them again. But 3 really big name games. They did like
it was that Game of War game.
Yeah, Game of War.
Which I've seen tons of ads on in general. But it's pretty cool to see because with the other one, Fire Age,
Mobile Strike, and Final Fantasy 15, and they did $4.5 billion in revenue in a 5-year period from 2014 to 18.
Pretty solid.
So, and the other part of this article is he's kind of launching this free to own mechanism, kind of foundation for his version of NFT gaming. And, he's kind of comparing it to, or it's in contrast to like play to earn, which in his mind, he kind of viewed as a failure, and just led to people essentially only playing the game to be able to, build up value to sell for more. And he's hoping that in his free to own model, there will be other incentives to keep players around, and in the ecosystem. And that's how Digi started. Digis were a free mint. There's an airdrop coming this Friday that's also going to be free. So he's already kind of putting his money where his mouth is with how he's launching the ecosystem without doing any paid mints. And there's been a little bit of back and forth on Twitter today where he's essentially calling out paid mints and saying paid mints are dead. It's free mint season, and saying how they've all failed, except for the other side. Even though a lot of folks would say on a short term, I mean, a lot of people are down on the other side. So I wouldn't call it a failure, but it's also not like a huge win at this point either. So he's making huge headlines. He's tweeting all over the place, but this was huge news, and the market responded incredibly to this.
Yeah, the other side was, and it was kind of worded that way, where it was a fundraise for the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it was meant to be an airdrop like. They did have 2 airdrops before that, so it wasn't like everything you've had to do with Yuga is paid for. But a lot of people took it as, oh, they're attacking other side. And then he's like, well, there's been thousands of NFTs that have airdropped you land that don't do anything. Like it's not just the other side, but those people that I think, because now that this is, at this point, it's the number 3 in a floor price, if you want to go off of floors, and this $200 million raise is a pretty big number. Like, to me, this is what happens whenever there's a competitor towards that ape community. They get very defensive about things. We're getting somewhat defensive about DeGods, but that one's on Solana, that one's whatever. But now this one with a leader who some people are comparing to Beanie. Which, what's your thoughts on that? Like, do you think he's a doxed Beanie, as I've seen some people talk about?
I mean, there's no reason to call this guy like a grifter, or like Beanie always had like that connotation, right? As just trying to kind of dump on folks and extract from the space. Like I don't really see that analogy here. He's definitely like painting himself as a villain though, and he feels like a villain, which I'm kind of here for at this point. And you're spot on. So many of the Yuga NFT holder influencers, talking heads, are like up in arms about this and feeling attacked. Like, who is this guy? He's only got 500 tweets. Like, this guy's sold a company for 600 million. And like he's one of the realest people with real credentials in this space, and you're a director of vibes. So I think the hate's been definitely unwarranted to the degree, but he's kind of asking for it with how aggressive he's been on Twitter. But hey, it's drumming up attention. I think he gets it. He gets what this economy thrives on. One of the biggest stories of the week, their airdrop was already going to be big on Friday. People are already calling for 25 ETH price targets on Digis ahead of that. There's only like 50 or 60 listings to there. So if another big sweep comes through, we saw a 369 ETH sweep or something just a few hours ago. I think the risk that I see at this point is, again, that attention. So they've already had this massive announcement today. They're going to have an airdrop on Friday. What is going to happen next? Like those are 2 huge events. And like, what will Gabriel and the Limit Break team be able to deliver in the next month after this Friday? to keep liquidity and attention in the market. I think that's the biggest risk that I see right now. Just because in a bull market this would be a slam dunk, and I'd be calling for 100 floor. But the liquid, we all know how rough the liquidity is in this market, and it can go away really fast.
Yeah.
And even on this hallmark day, all like this blockbusting day, they only had 185 sales, right? Which is still, Azuki on a peak day did 10,000 ETH. Bored Apes have done 10 to 20,000 on good days, right? So still a ways to go, but really strong start to the week for the digis.
Yeah, and quick side note off that, there's a reasonable amount of volume over on the Doge chain this week. They finally have a marketplace up and running, and some of the floors have gone for, it's minimal dollar amounts compared to these others that we're talking about, but it went from like 50 Doge floors to 700 Doge floors, which granted that's still only like $50, but it's funny, like they broke the chain. There was just too much demand, and it's crazy how like we see these random pumps from stuff that kind of come out of nowhere. And not to necessarily compare one that's 15 ETH to that, but I mean, when we just looked at that chart, it was 7 ETH yesterday, and it's double. Like quickly going from 7 up to 15 plus is pretty significant in that, what's that, 12-hour period, maybe even less. Like this is earlier this morning, you were able to get one at under 10 ETH.
Yeah.
It's kind of wild how that at the end there, basically since that raise. So one thought that I had with that is like $200 million somewhat legitimizes it, right? Like there are people comparing it to Proof and Moonbirds, and they're saying, well, this isn't $200 million raised by people throwing 2.5 ETH at at them and hoping to sell it for more than that. This was like a raise from more like VCs, where this might be closer to a Proof Pass than a Moonbird when it comes down to it. Like there's only 2,000 of these. I think you said the true number is closer to 1,500, and the supply is so low. And if there are VCs hopping in on this and less likely to be selling, like as you mentioned, this could just continue to go up with not many listed. People want to hold at least till this Friday. People are backing this guy as the villain. Some people like to attach themselves to stuff like that, where it's like, oh, like he's not going to just stop tweeting. Like he's going to ride this wave. It's working for his business, So, do you think that there's just not going to be a lot of diamond holders here, like we saw with Proof?
I do think there will be. So, I think this is a really important point to folks who are thinking about this ecosystem seriously on entering. I've been watching the top holders very closely over the last week, and none of them are moving any of their assets, at least so far. And granted, that's a short sample size, but by my count, the top 10 to 12 holders account for about 500 of the supply. This is only a 2,000 NFT set, so that's 25%. So you're already down to about 1,500 of the NFTs, which are really going to be in circulation. And that's just so much significantly less than 10,000. And we've already seen that in these just violent moves in the market. And, they'll run up 2 ETH and they'll fall 1 or 2 ETH and then they'll go back. But it's a really important part of analyzing the set, as well as thinking about it from a market cap perspective. There's only 2,000 of these. It's 15 ETH right now. That's the same as the 3 ETH floor for a 10,000 PFP set, if you're comparing that way. So 15 sounds like a lot, but when you think about 3 ETH for a 10K set, it doesn't feel like a lot. And I've already seen that argument and that logic being used by some of the whales or bigger traders who are entering the set still here today. And that logic makes sense to me as well. And I also like the analogy to an alpha pass, or not an alpha pass, but like an entry pass, access pass. That appears to be how Gabriel and Limit Break are going to run this.
Yeah.
So from that fashion, could it follow a proof pass price target? This proof for gaming, I could definitely get behind that narrative. So it's a fun one to watch. I would not be selling this today with everything else going on.
Yeah, and this idea of the like free to earn model, which maybe we could do a whole show on that, but I don't necessarily believe the way he's saying it. Like, you don't necessarily think of like goblins, right? Like, just because you gave them out for free, they're 15 ETH now. People buying them now have this expectation that you're going to provide 15 ETH worth of value to you. So that's the danger of these things. So yes, the idea of free mints, but so many free mints are just trash anyway, right? But like with Goblin Town, that got up to what, 7, 8 ETH. It's now back under 2. So you could still have that same dynamic that he's complaining with the paid mints, because they're like, think of how many of these projects have gotten over 5 ETH floor. None of them minted for 5 ETH. So it's not necessarily the greatest argument. But
I'm with you.
He's pushing this narrative with it.
I'm with you that free to own is only free that very first day. So I am curious, how he would kind of counter that point and to kind of understand a little bit more about their plans to continue doing, free mints going forward to expand the ecosystem. Because you're spot on. It's not free to own anymore.
It's not free if I want to own it.
Right.
At this point. I do understand the idea that like all these future ones are, and that's how Goblin Town did it too, right? Where all of these additional ones you were given for free. So yes, you can argue, Goblin Town had success because of that as well. But at some point, you're probably gonna have to do something else. Again, 2K supply. I think D's had a tweet that was like, are we just going to see a bunch of projects with 2,000 supply? And it's something that I've been kind of harping on for a little while here. I just don't think the 10K model works anymore. And I would love to see more projects that are low supply like this. I think it creates more demand, and with less supply, less people, as you mentioned earlier, there's less people that you have to keep happy with that. Less botters that are going to be in there. More people that are holding just 1 or 2 of them. That's always been the big thing with Bored Apes, is how many people only have 1. So that's why they're not selling. So I think that there's a lot of factors going on there, but I mean, it's cool to see. Like, we haven't seen a big hype project, something like this, in a little while, probably since Goblins, really. And we now have this somewhat of a villain, a spoken character on Twitter who some people are hating on, others are loving at the same time. So it's cool. It's like back when NFTs were more fun in that sense. He's creating a little fun dynamic there.
I think this might. Oh, looks like there was a huge sweep again just now. Another 10 off the board.
Jeez. But the floor is like 17.
And we can move on. I just want to say, I put this in my article for my weekly preview, but like the floor 7 days ago was 2.7. And again, like when we did the show, just 2.5 weeks ago, the day this came out, we were talking about live on the air, it was 0.6. And these are the opportunities that exist in NFTs right now. And they're few and far between, but it definitely pays off, to stay in the ecosystem, pay attention and look for opportunities like this, because there aren't too many other areas in the investment space in the world right now where you can get these kind of returns.
20x, yeah.
Feels pretty special. So I think this is a huge win for the space regardless. Yeah. Hopefully Gabe can play somewhat nice, even though I'm kind of digging the villain role. But this is a great start to the week. And as some people have said, this money is likely going to rotate around somewhat. for these sellers. And
Yeah.
they're gonna have their choice this week with the lot going on.
So, a last point that I have on it, going off of your argument on there's still these opportunities, and how I would say, and this is obviously in hindsight, but from other projects that I've seen have success similar to this, a couple things happened with this project. Yes, it like ran up right away, but it held up there. There were top end sales. That's another thing that we look for. And just the consistent volume when there wasn't much volume in other sets, but there were still people buying these, and it was flat around that, as you can see in here, 3 to 4 range for a little bit. So looking back, like it's very hard to throw 4 ETH at something right now. But at the same time, like throwing 4 ETH at something is probably at one thing like this that has the VCs and lower supply is probably better than throwing 4 ETH at, well, I don't want to say at like 100 of something, but instead you're buying these things that are like 0.02, 0.03, way more likely to just completely die. So
Yeah.
that's what I would say on these. But yeah, it's cool to see. And now it's going to somewhat compete because it has flipped. Next transition, Moonbirds. So now these are both Moonbirds, kind of halted any sort of momentum we were expecting to see from Moonbirds today. They are sitting around 15, which they got down low 12s. So they've bounced over the past week, ahead of Future Proof, which is going to be tomorrow. So still, though, I mean, even just looking at this, 5 sales and it's 16 again. So there's only a few sales here. It wasn't specifically at Pudgy Peppies. They are a project that was around 0.02, but at the same time, like, yeah, there's tons of those that come out every day, and there's tons that do much worse than Pudgy Peppies. So for Moonbirds, what are your thoughts here heading into Future Proof?
Yeah, so for one, I definitely thought we'd see a little bit more action today. The market was somewhat dead over the weekend again because of the crypto crash, so I think that hurt a little bit. But today's the last day to get a bird and get it in the nest, and they were hitting everyone over the head that if you have a Moonbird, you want to get it in the nest ahead of tomorrow's event. And they kind of recapped what everyone can expect. So we got that preview a few weeks back, which is the event that kind of rallied the set from the bottom around 12.5, now back to 14, 15 range. So we're going to get a deeper dive on all their plans and the vision for the Proof Collective, the Moonbirds oddies, the product high rise, and more. I think a few pieces that people are, I think, the most focused on was understanding more about product high rise, when that's going to come out, and kind of what it means for the NFT holders, the future of the Proof Collective, and the curated drops that they're going to keep doing on roughly a monthly basis. There will be a lot of interest in that. I think the oddities and the burning mechanic there might have the most interest per person because it's been one of the sets that has brought more people in with a lower entry price into the ecosystem. So that's going to be a hot topic. But the item that's not on this list, but many people are speculating on, is Win Token. And there's growing sentiment that there will be some kind of a token announcement tomorrow. Whether or not that's an airdrop, check your wallet style, and there's 10,000 tokens in there, or at least details about what a Moonbirds token would look like, what kind of mechanics they'll use, that kind of thing. But at this point, I put the odds of some type of a token announcement tomorrow at like 90% plus. I think for sure it's going to happen. I'm less certain we're going to have coins that we can claim tomorrow, but I think we'll have details of something. I'm curious for your thoughts. I know you've been following this pretty closely as well.
Yeah, I feel like there might be a snapshot. He's basically said you want to be nested on this day. So whether or not they announce it and you get it today or tomorrow, I think there's going to be something that like as of this day. And they've basically said in all of their announcements that they don't want these to be the same as when the nesting days are. So it makes sense for it to happen now. Uh, I know tokens are hard, just the technicalities behind it, the legality. There's a lot that goes into tokens. I feel like they've been around for 4 months might be too soon for them to have it fully fledged out. But as we know, like Kevin's been around for a while on finance and probably has a decent team out there, legal team that has been looking into things like that. So we'll see. Like, I do agree with you that there's going to be something to do with these tokens, whether that is a real token that's tradable. There's LPs out there. That would be interesting too, because I think there's going to be people willing to play the trading game on tokens. So I wonder ways that you can earn it. That'll be important. Like nesting levels has to be a thing, I would think. So if you're in gold nest versus silver versus straw, if you're not nested at all. So it'll be interesting to see how they break it all out. Hopefully it's not overly complicated. Digis are taking some of the eyeballs off of it right now, but what what do you think they could do that would get the eyeballs back on proof?
I think a token drop or announcement would definitely bring some eyeballs. I think there's going to be a lot of questions about that. A lot of people have kind of been negative on that idea. Like this is a terrible crypto market to try to introduce a token into. Though we've seen an NFT token in Dust do really well. Of course, it's tied to an upcoming super hyped mint, which is something going into it. Jeff Lebowski, the writer, the author of the thread I've got up here, has an interesting theory. I think it's worth sharing.
Yeah.
His idea is that this proof coin is backed with a basket of quality NFTs. And he thinks that Kevin Rose and the team have been quietly buying up autoglyphs, Fidenzas, squiggles, archetypes, all these, super strong, valuable OG NFTs, and that the coin is going to be backed by those. And he kind of goes into his logic. He's kind of piecing that together from what he's heard on some podcasts, some questions that he's seen the team asking, as well as some wallet sleuthing there. It's an interesting idea. I guess I have a few questions, feedback on that. One would be, so then wouldn't the coin just have a set pegged value to those assets? And then what would be the incentive to buy it, or how would the value of the token go up over time? So I think there would have to be more to it than just backed by that basket. Additionally, Kevin kind of came out of the gate with this whole nesting concept, saying that someone who buys a Bored Ape the day before the token drop should not get the same amount of tokens that someone who's held it since mint. So it is about damn time for people who have held their Moonbirds from the beginning to get rewarded in a differentiated fashion than people who bought in the last week. And of course, we want people who bought in the last week to be rewarded. There has to be an incentive to continue buying these NFTs, or of course they'll fall off. But at the same time, that was one of the very early premises of this project and nesting, and there hasn't been anything yet. So I think that is I expect that to be delivered here, and if it's not, I think there will be a lot of upset people.
Yeah, Willis is saying that he just bought the 150 ETH squiggle as well. That was last week, I believe. Mm-hmm. So interesting take here. I know that some projects have done this, like the Purs have done it, where they have this like community vault that's 900 ETH worth of value to it, and that has some backing. Do you think that that's necessarily better in a market like this, where the way that NFTs are trending overall, do you really want to be backed by NFTs? That's a secondary question, which I don't know how much FUD would come with that, but that could be something. At least they're the grails. These are generally the projects that hold up a lot better. I think I saw that squiggles are around 11.5, back to 11.5 ETH floor now. So yeah, I think it's interesting, and it goes back to sort of the roots of proof as an ecosystem, and being sort of these artists first, having the connections to the big name artists. Grails obviously last week had some of those artists as part of it. So it's cool that they are doing it that way. I think if this is how it plays out, then it'll be interesting to see how people react to it. That's always been the thing over the past couple of months. How people are reacting to Moonbird announcements has been generally negative, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's the risk here. So this is a really important event tomorrow. And
Yeah.
a lot of people kind of think this is kind of like the last shot here for Moonbirds. And I hate to say that because the project is 4 months old, like you said. But that's just the nature of the space. And there's so little liquidity to go around. And if the event flops tomorrow, people don't like the announcements, I do think that Moonbirds will be relegated to the Clone X Suzuki Doodles level in that 7 to 8 ETH range. And it becomes harder and harder to see what would be the narrative or catalyst to revive those. But on the flip side, strong announcement with, a token that people think is smart and want to be a part of, I think could easily send these back over 20. So, and personally, I think it will be a bullish event tomorrow. I think people really liked the preview that we saw a week and a half ago. I think they're going to ride that momentum, and it's going to be a good day tomorrow.
Yeah, I think that's interesting to pay attention to tomorrow. Like, there's going to be this information. I would guess probably, unless you are a holder, you probably have to find out after. Like, they're not going to live tweet the event. They're streaming it to their holders. I wonder what kind of delay there is between the two.
Between the live stream and the...
Yeah, like they're going to make this announcement. We could see a floor moving.
Right.
And you're not going to know what the announcement was. But if it's buying or undercutting, you won't know. That's going to be kind of funny if we see that tomorrow for people that aren't able to listen in. Because I believe anyone that holds oddities up to proof can get access to it through the Discord. They're going to live stream it if you're not there physically. But outside of that, people don't. So it'll be funny if we start seeing it move. But yeah, that one will be tomorrow. And then obviously the big project of the week is y00ts, which I just got a message. Another celebrity got added to the list. Travis Scott.
Oh wow, that's a big one.
So they're adding.
Did they just tweet that out?
They have added like 2 or 3. Yeah, that would be on that y00ts list in Frank's tweet there. If you click y00ts list, yeah. So this shows like each one as they accept people.
Okay. Yeah, let me see.
And yeah, so basically, there's been some big names, especially as of late. They had Wayne Rooney yesterday, Allen Iverson, some big name athletes. As I mentioned, that Travis Scott one was on there. Fubar is right there.
It was a big one.
Is a big name. And look at the engagement on all these. 400 likes just announcing one random person. Like, not the Fubar one, the other one. Even like, it's kind of interesting, like how many engagements these get once you get accepted. So, maybe I'll get a little boost once I get accepted. Frank, let me know. But yeah, this is the big project coming up on Friday. DGods are nearly a 600 Solana floor,
Wild.
which is it's somewhere around like 17K right now, I think, in USD. Because with the little mini crash last week, Solana went down to about 30. It might be 31 now, actually. So it's around 17, 18K USD for the floor, which, well, at this point in time, it's not above Digis anymore. But yeah, this was probably like 400 when we left on Thursday. Obviously been somewhat of a thin floor. People are buying into it for that. But if you buy in, if you have a dead god, you automatically get Ute list, I believe. You also get like some dust when you buy one. So I think it's over half of the applications that were to be accepted will be have been accepted at this point. Submissions are now closed, so I think they're going to speed up that process. Like they tweet each one by one. They are hand selecting them. I wonder how many have been already selected, and they're just trying to spread them out. But yeah, this is going to be on Friday. We saw dust itself. The coin is now, what's that, 345 or so? Yeah, 347. And I mean, look at that 7-day chart. Literally
Insane.
up only. There's that one dip in there, which was the Powell made that announcement at Jackson Hole, and all of crypto went down. So he could have gotten back in at 2 there. But I mean, have you ever seen anything more up only than this 1 week chart for dust?
No.
Then everything else is down.
This is incredibly impressive, especially like this chart doesn't even tell the story of the crypto market backdrop this weekend, where everything was dropping and there was panic and everyone was a bear on the timeline. I think the first tell on this was when it was 280 ahead of Jackson Hole and Powell got on and promised pain for everyone. It dropped to 2, but then it shot right back to 240, dipped again. But then it was basically you didn't really have a shot at an entry below 240 unless you were, watching it, ready to go for those first few hours. And that kind of told me, like, oh man, there's some serious demand for this coin right now. I didn't think it would be this. This was kind of our price target ahead of the mint here. 350. Maybe getting close to 4. Got to maybe raise those targets now. And there's a lot to unpack. And I want to talk about the NFT side, but while we're on the token, if this follows a similar arc to ApeCoin, which is our best, recent example of an NFT drop, that has to be paid for in a token like this, we should expect us to continue to move up ahead of the mint. So it doesn't feel like 347 today is the top. I've seen stats floating around. There's still a lot of Ute lists accepted applicants who don't have enough dust in their wallets. So there's going to be more dust.
Allen Iverson has enough dust in his wallet? Probably not.
Is Allen Iverson going to?
Is he going to?
Hopefully, someone on his team is taking care of the dust transactions for him. But yeah, I mean, I think 5 is probably my new target. But I would definitely be holding this till at least Wednesday, Thursday. I think there's some game theory and like how far do you want to potentially front run the sell off. And we have to expect there's going to be a sell off, right? We saw what happened to ApeCoin. It was 22, 24, fell to 16, and then essentially it's been down only ever since.
Yeah. This one is super interesting compared to ApeCoin. So one way that I would describe it is with the Ape drop, there was way more wallets that missed, way more wallets that had Ape and missed because they thought they could go up day of with 600 Ape. buy
Mm-hmm.
2 of them. Second they didn't, they dump it. Here, there's a lot of people who don't have dust yet and are waiting to find out if they are going to win the application. I think at this point you're going to see more people like that. So that might slow the raise of it. There are going to be people that need to buy it in order to mint, because the mint is pretty widely expressed to be plus EV. But I think the sell pressure is going to be less than Ape had, because there's less people buying it who are trying and can't. So yeah, that Wednesday, Thursday is going to be that'll be fun to watch, because you could still get accepted. I think the second they say the list is complete and people aren't on it, that's when it's gonna dump. That could be an interesting buy opportunity though. At that, if it like instantly dumps off of that, could be. So there's a couple different sides of it where if you don't have dust yet, it might be better for you to wait and buy it after it's announced that the list is closed, and you can buy it. We don't know, is the mint going to be open for 24 hours? I don't think that was defined yet. So yeah, I think you could wait if you don't have dust yet. So there's tons of game theory involved here, and I don't think they put anywhere like, oh, this is how many spots are left, which is also kind of
Right.
interesting. But they're still going to burn over 5 million tokens as part of this process. Yeah, Howie Mandel was the other one on
That's
there
right.
who got accepted. Lil Baby. Howie Mandel, I don't know if you've seen, he's done a few different interviews. He's actually kind of deep into NFTs and crypto. I've heard him
Nice.
talk in a few different interviews. He's really bullish on the idea of like tickets using NFTs. And he's like, once I heard about that, like it made way more sense to me. But he's like, also people like to flex status, so he gets that side of it too. What are you looking at in this Utes drop? Because even if you were to get on the Ute list, that's one mint. Do you think you're going to try to potentially snipe additional ones? Because right now the play on buying Solana could be cheaper than the play on buying Dust at this point, if Dust ends up going to 5. So what are you looking at when you're trying to play this one out?
Yeah, I think so. First, let's think about price targets. So
Yeah, yeah,
DGods is 580 SOL right now, about 12 ETH. My mind just works in ETH, so it's harder for me to do the SOL
yeah.
computations. I think just late last week, they're like 8 ETH. So they're up like 4 ETH this over the weekend, essentially. And then like 2 weeks ago, would you say they're probably closer to like 4 to 5 ETH, maybe less? So I'm the only reason I'm talking that through is I'm trying to figure out what the market might be pricing in, this free Utes allow-less spot, right? So right off the bat, 4 ETH. 4 ETH feels right, because this isn't necessarily a companion set, right? This is not the MAYC to DGods.
I'd say it's more like MAYC than BAKC.
It's definitely
It's
not the
like
dog. So put that
for
aside.
people that aren't in DGods already, this is a way of you getting in for a lot cheaper. And it's like, this is what everyone's talking about. So to get in for, $1,000 or whatever, on something like this, I think is, some people are going to look at that and be pretty excited to get into the ecosystem, I think.
Yeah, I mean the mint is a slam dunk. So 375 dust. You're talking like $1,200 roughly. That's what it was this morning. It was around 0.8 ETH equivalent. So right there, the mint should be at least a 2 or 3x off the gate. Now I think the real question becomes, is this a true onboarding event to a group of buyers who are now interested in Solana NFTs, Frank DeGods, and want to be a part of this NFT set and community? Or is this just the hottest flip of the week? And I can see arguments for both sides. So certainly they've done a great job with these applications. They've got athletes. They've got some of the biggest ETH NFT influencers coming over, and they've done a tremendous job of getting the attention out. I was reading through their white paper. I like that they're innovating and trying something new. So for those who may not be familiar with this, they are essentially trying to do something different with IP rights and licenses. Effectively, they're creating what is going to be a y00ts store where artists can create essentially clothes for the y00ts PFPs that holders will be able to buy and essentially buy, I think, with dust, and essentially dress their NFTs and be able to change them, customize them on an ongoing basis. Mm-hmm. And there's detail in the white paper about how you have to stake your NFTs to accumulate the dust, or the y00ts token rather, to be able to do this. We can put all that aside. I think the question is, are customizable NFTs going to work or not? I'm not totally sure. I think it's cool. It's innovative. I think the downside is there's less incentive to buy any mid-tier or rare trait in some ways, because you can just buy a floor, find an artist that you like, and then just customize your NFT that way. I feel like it also disincentivizes like trading around in the set. So like, for example, I've been buying Pudgy Penguins. Sometimes I'll buy a floor one from a price perspective, but then I see another one that I like more. Maybe I'll try to trade for that. This kind of disincentivizes that, because now I should just go to the y00ts store and just try to get a custom hat or shirt. So I'm not totally sold on the idea. First, I love that they're trying something new again. I'm not sure how the community is going to react. So that's one of my negative feedback points. And I'm not sure that everyone coming from ETH is going to stick around in Solana. That might be the biggest risk.
Yeah.
That people are just coming over for this one transaction. They're going to sell. They're going to pull out their Solana, convert it back to USDC or ETH, and get out. I think that's the bigger risk. But one that they've done, at least they've done a valiant effort to try to mitigate that early on.
Yeah, and Alex here is saying that the core mechanics of the white paper are being reworked a little bit. So, yeah, I think to your point, I think Frank is very responsive to feedback. And I think their community themselves, like they have a lot of trust in him. He's basically like the king of Solana at this point. And I do think if people don't like the mechanics, if people want things to change, I think he's willing to hear from people and make those changes that are needed and necessary to keep people around. I think part of this whole y00t list is trying to bring people over to Solana. To your point, will they stay? I think there's a lot of people that say this happened during last year's Solana summer. I think it would be more likely that people were staying. Right now, people have been off Solana for so long. I feel like it's hard to bring them back. I've played around in Solana a little bit over the past week since this happened, and there has been some decent, profitable projects over there. It does seem like people are kind of going over to Solana ahead of this, maybe prepping themselves on how to use Magic Eden, or like I've seen the question on how do I even get dust? Like that's been a big question people have out there. So maybe this is a good just learning opportunity for people to figure out a different blockchain and different mechanics of another blockchain. The customizable with this y00ts store, we've seen a lot of projects on ETH that have tried things like this. I just don't think it necessarily appeals to a ton of people. There's 15,000 of these. So it's a little harder to appeal to. Originally, there might be close to 15,000 people that are holding these. So the high percent of holders on this, do you think that'll be a good thing early on? If most people only have one of these, they're more likely to hold it for a little bit. Or do you think that doesn't necessarily matter all that much?
Yeah, I think it has to be a good thing anytime you have a more distributed ownership base. And I think it's pretty clear there's going to be demand for this. And if it was an open market mint, I think it would mint for more than the market value of 375 dust times 340 or whatever the token is at. Now, what happens over time? I think still there's going to have to be some incentive to hold these and for people to want to be a part of the ecosystem. And the used store and these clubs are going to be a big part of that. And of course, like, I'm not as close to this ecosystem, so I'm not an expert. There are people who are much more experts on me. In this white paper, they're talking about these 3 DAOs: Mickey the Gods, Guzzler DAO, Coral Bear DAO. What if they'd had this opportunity, to create custom gear for themselves? I like that. Here's 10 or 20 people who can now kind of create shirts or hats for their NFTs that they can all rock and show that they're all part of this. So that's a cool concept. We haven't really seen that yet. So I definitely like that a lot. But I have to comment on Alex T's comment here. The core mechanics of the paper are being reworked. This is a $20 million mint that's happening in 4 days. That's a red flag to me. The mechanics of how this is all going to work should be fleshed out. And I can appreciate flexibility and listening to the community, but there's also some onus of a mint this size happening in 4 days. You need to have your ideas concrete to me about how this is all going to work. And there's a lot more risk, in my opinion, if things are up in the air. It may change. And we've seen how negative feedback is and how quickly tides can turn in the NFT space for announcements or changes that the herd doesn't like. So you don't want to open yourselves up to that. But man, it's I've been playing the downside and some of the risks, but still, this has been a huge win for Frank and the team. It's kind of hard to overstate how much they've come up in relevancy over the last month. It's been really cool to watch. DigiDaigaku has put Solana on the map. This is going to be a big one for Friday, and I hope it blows off. I hope it's a mega success. I think that's just overall going to be good for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, and it'll be good for Solana, of course, as well. Kind of putting some more legitimacy over there. There's all these big name celebrities that now are getting added to the list, and that part is somewhat bullish to me because they are, as I kind of alluded to earlier, like less likely to sell, more likely to just have it and hold it because that's what they generally do, and that's what raised Bored Apes as quickly as it did. So I think the secondary action on Friday is going to be something to definitely watch. Might I might be interested in buying a dip. Like I definitely could see people who just get it, dump it right away. Like there's going to be a bunch of people doing that. But at the same time, like I wouldn't be surprised if, say, it opened in like the 80s and fell to 40, 50 right away, but then shot back up to 100. Like that's definitely something that I could see happening as well. It's just all eyes are on this right now. Like I've never seen so many people talking about Solana, DeGods. Every time Frank tweets or has a reply or something, it pops up on my timeline. There's just so much engagement around this right now that to me, like, I don't know. I keep going back and forth if I want to try to buy on secondary. As you mentioned, like I don't know how much rarity is going to matter on it, so the plays might just be floor. But I do think to an extent, there'll be an aesthetic to this that you'll want. I did like the art of the Utes. They do have some cool art to them. Some of them will look cooler than others as well. But even like the base model ones are decent, I think. So yeah, if you just go to their website on there, you can just click the middle button and it'll switch through. So they have some Bored Ape vibes to them, which I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but yeah, they're just like these Yetis and they have some cool gear in case, but it's kind of cool that every time you click that they change their logo too. I think that's kind of part of what they're going for as well. So yeah, well, when we're back on Thursday, we'll be talking about it.
And
Once again,
Thursday,
you'll be
yeah, and we'll have a little bit more data points too Thursday,
yeah.
I think, to inform the
Yeah.
decision. I mean, if DeGods are up another couple of ETH, then it's going to be load up, right? Like if the market's pricing things at 5 or 6 ETH effectively, then I think at least being ready to try to snipe on the secondary is going to be something that everyone should do who's got the means. And it's feeling a little bit more and more like the Moonbirds mint, which was
Yeah.
2.5 ETH the mint, but came out of the gate above 10, settled at 7, and then of course we saw it go crazy. I don't think it's going to be anywhere to that degree, especially in this market. But I could see it, 20% of that, which would still be a huge run up. So we'll definitely have more info by Thursday.
Yeah. And hopefully, I don't know if I want to say hopefully positive or negative here, but Digis might be 30 ETH by Thursday at this rate.
Hopefully.
So I don't know if that's a hopefully or not, but that we'll have the reactions off of proof by then. We'll see how people are dealing with those, and we'll know a little more about Digi. Well, that's gonna also happen on Friday, huh? So that airdrop will be on Friday. So it should be another packed show on Thursday. These are the things really to look out for. We didn't really talk about it much, but with the VMAs yesterday, they had Snoop Dogg and Eminem performed from the other side, which was kind of neat to see. The normie reaction wasn't much. It wasn't as like hateful as some of the other ones. People were like, I wish we just saw more of them performing instead of just these cartoons. I don't think people knew that they were necessarily like in a metaverse that was built from this game, from this NFT they bought. I think it was kind of cool, but I do also kind of agree to an extent that like you're at the VMAs, you might want the physical live versions of them. But I don't know. I thought it was cool that they like did this on a pretty main stage. I don't know. What did you think?
I'm definitely in the camp that any kind of exposure on this scale is always going to be good. On the short term, I think this is probably like a neutral event, but it definitely continues to legitimize at least Bored Apes, the concept of the metaverse, and it's just another day of this kind of being exposed to hundreds of thousands or even millions of people.
Yeah.
Which is definitely a win. I think, as always, the NFT space always overhypes things, leading up to an event. And of course, some people thought maybe an announcement was coming, something bigger was going to be revealed, and of course, not that much else happened. So that's what made it feel like a little bit of a letdown. That and the fact that you guys do for an announcement, like we saw the roadmap, Mecha Dogs, Mecha Apes. There's all these things coming. The second 100K land sale. When are we going to find out more? And I know on their 1 year. It was also the 1 year anniversary of Mutants over the weekend, so that was kind of tied into it. But overall, I think the performance was good exposure. I've seen kind of mixed reviews of the actual set itself, but that's all right.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I think that just as you mentioned, like it's another thing, another piece of exposure. Doesn't have to be massive. I don't think the reaction from people on this one was as wow, this is the craziest thing ever versus when it happened at Ape Fest.
Mhm.
But yeah, a couple months later, showing that they're still trying to make their apes part of their identity, which is like cool to see. So we'll see. Maybe at the next VMAs, they're all just going to be Utes. All these Utes performing. So that would be funny. Like if Utes just become the next big thing in that case. So yeah, we'll be back here later this week. Hopefully, we'll have enough information to keep you informed. Maybe the Ute list will be announced by then.
Mhm.
In which case, maybe we'll be able to watch what happens with the price of dust heading into it. So that's something to keep your eyes on this week. Making sure whenever they close that list, if you're holding dust, you might want to be by a computer. So that's at least what I'm thinking currently. Is that's where we'll see that dip after. But if you don't have the dust, you can wait for that to happen. So we'll see. But cool. So yeah, we'll be back here on Thursday, and we will see you guys next time.